Thank you all for coming tonight. We are excited to have such wonderful speakers and opinions tonight. Both of our presenters are well educated, thoughtful, intellectual, and as such, we will ask the audience to give them the respect that they are due. In the interest of keeping this event an open, safe space for discussions, we ask that you do not interrupt the speakers with applause or snapping until they have finished their presentations. We also ask that all expressions be positive and respectful. And on a slightly more pedestrian note, we ask you to turn off all cell phones and electronic devices. Also, we are aware that although this conversation is aimed at the intellectual framework of the life issue, the topic is inherently emotional for both perspectives. We ask that all audience members please keep this in mind at all times during the debate and in your conversations afterwards. Professor Scott Klusendorf. Scott Klusendorf is president and founder of the Life Training Institute. Life Training Institute trains pro-life advocates to persuasively defend their views in the marketplace of ideas by clearly presenting the pro-life arguments rooted in science and philosophy, through live events and through full use of the modern media, including the internet, radio, television, and the publication of books and articles. Scott Klusendorf travels the world through the United States and Canada, training pro-life advocates to persuasively defend their views in the public square. And he regularly appears on nationally syndicated programs. Scott has debated or lectured to student groups in over 70 colleges and universities, including Stanford, USC, UCLA, Johns Hopkins, Loyola Marymount Law School, West Virginia Medical School, MIT, the U.S. Air Force Academy, Caltech, and the University of North Carolina. His debate opponents have included Nadine Strawson, president of the ACLU, and Kathy Neer, president of the Planned Parenthood of California. Scott also trains thousands of high school students each year to make persuasive cases for life as a part of their worldview training prior to college. Scott is the author of several books and many articles. Each year, he helps pregnancy centers nationally raise over $1 million for women facing unplanned pregnancies. The money helps women before and after they give birth. Scott is a graduate of UCLA with honors and holds a master's degree in Christian apologetics from Loyola University. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Klusendorf. I'm going to deliver the introduction for Professor Malcolm Potts.
Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Great? Awesome. Okay, so here we have a formidable, amazing professor from UC Berkeley's campus, Professor Malcolm Potts. And he is a Cambridge-trained obstetrician and reproductive scientist. He is the first holder of the Fred H. Bixby Endowed Chair in Population and Family Planning in the School of Public Health at UC Berkeley. While he was the first medical director of the International Planned Parenthood Federation for a decade, he introduced family planning methods into scores of developing countries. He became the first medical director of the International Planned Parenthood Federation in 1968. In 1972, he was the first physician to promote the technique of uterine manual vacuum aspiration. He then moved to the United States and became the CEO of Family Health International. During this period, FHI became the largest global AIDS prevention program outside of the World Health Organization. And he also launched the first large-scale studies of maternal mortality, which helped start the Worldwide Safe Motherhood Initiative. He has published 10 books and over 200 scientific papers. He is a board member of Population Services International. He is a board member of Venture Strategies for Health and Development. And we would also like to acknowledge the head and founder of Venture Strategies, Martha Campbell, who we are fortunate enough to have in the audience tonight. And at UC Berkeley, Professor Potts holds the titles of, as the chair and division of Community Health and Human Development in the School of Public Health. He's the chair of the Committee for the Protection of Human Subjects for the University of California, Berkeley, and he is the head of Global Health Specialty Areas in the School of Public Health. So let me present you all the man himself, Mr. Professor Malcolm Potts.
Both Professor Klusendorf and Potts will be speaking, and on the request of both speakers, Professor Klusendorf will be speaking first, and then Professor Potts. They will get 10 to 15 minutes apiece. They will be followed by a rebuttal of 5 to 10 minutes, and then the 3 panels within the audience will be 15 minutes apiece. The 3 panels tonight are Berkeley Students for Life, which will be representing the pro-life side of the debate, to ask a question of the speakers. ULAP, Universal Love and Peace, will be presenting the pro-choice side, and will be able to ask questions of the speakers. We will also be taking questions from you, the audience, the 3rd panel tonight, via note card. There should be one on your desk, but unfortunately we forgot to bring them, so in this case, please write your question on a sheet of paper, raise your hand when you'd like for it to be collected, and we will send someone to do so. Closing statements will be 5 minutes apiece from each of the speakers, and both of them will be available at the end of the event to converse with each of them. Both the Universal Love and Peace and Students for Life members are open to talk with anyone else afterwards. We thank you very much for attending, and we hope you will find this as enjoyable and enlightening as we hope you will. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start with Professor Scott Klusendorf.
Thank you. I want you to take a journey with me about 10 years into the future. And I want each of you to imagine that you have met the man or woman of your dreams, you're married, and you have a 5-year-old boy. And one day you're at the kitchen sink washing up after dinner, and that 5-year-old boy comes in behind you with your back turned and says to you the following: "Daddy or Mommy, can I kill this?" Now some of you might be thinking, little boys ask that question? Let me enlighten you. I have been married for 27 years to the most glorious woman in all of Christendom. We have a son 22 who's in the U.S. Army. He's up on the DMZ at Korea. We have a son 21 in Afghanistan, have a son 15, and a daughter 11. And I have personally heard that question, "Daddy, can I kill this?" multiple times, and usually his hands are on his brother's throat when he's asking the question, "Daddy, can I kill this?" What would be the first question out of your mouth when you hear that little voice say, "Daddy or Mommy, can I kill this?" What is it? What has he got? Cockroach? Snail? Well, maybe, but don't show Mom. Neighbor kitty? Whoa. And brother by the throat, you have issues. Now, some of you might be thinking, why on earth would this dude fly out from Atlanta to lay that kind of example on us as an opening statement? Because, men and women, it gets us right to the heart of the topic we're discussing tonight. How human do we have to be to matter? But before we can answer that question, we have to answer a predicate question. Who counts as one of us to matter? And does that include the unborn? But we can't even answer that till we answer the question, what is the unborn? Can we kill the unborn? My answer is yes, we can. If what? If the unborn are not human. If, speaking quite frankly, the unborn are no different than clipping a fingernail, I see no reason to oppose abortion at all. But if it takes the life of a defenseless human being, that's another different matter altogether. You have to answer the question, what is the unborn? Before you answer the question, can we kill the unborn? For example, no one here in this room tonight would think that we can kill toddlers in the name of choice and who decides. No one would say we should trust women to make their own personal decisions if we were talking about killing 4-year-olds. But when it comes to the topic of abortion, it's not enough to simply assume the unborn aren't human. We have to know if they're human or not, because taking their lives, if they're human beings, would require justification. We've got to answer the question, what is it? Before we answer the question, can we kill the unborn? And this was a point that feminist Naomi Wolf pointed out in a New Republic piece in 1995, when she argued that when we talk about abortion, meaning people on her side of the issue, when we talk about abortion, we need to be honest about the fetus. And she had a very interesting quote, and I want to read it to you. Now, Naomi Wolf is a feminist who does not hold my position on abortion. She would hold Dr. Potts' position. Naomi Wolf said this: "How can we charge that it is vile and repulsive for pro-lifers to brandish vile and repulsive images of abortion if the images are real? To insist that truth is in poor taste is the very height of hypocrisy. Besides, if these images are often the facts of the matter, and if we then claim that it's offensive for pro-choice women to be confronted with them, then we are making a judgment that women are too inherently weak to face a truth about which they have to make a grave decision. This truth, we should bravely look at all of the evidence, even if we find it repulsive personally. In just a moment, I'm going to roll a very short 55-second DVD clip. And I want you to know that viewing, of course, is completely optional. In fact, I'll tell you exactly what's in it so that if you choose not to watch, you can simply look away and you won't even hear or see anything that you don't want to hear or see. There's no narration in this clip, and I won't describe what's in the clip. What you'll see if you watch is this. You won't see an abortion performed, but you will see the aftermath. First trimester, second trimester, and third trimester images, 55 seconds long. I didn't fly in here tonight to UC Berkeley to condemn people who may have had abortions. I have no interest in that. But I do have a case at getting at the truth. After this clip is over, I'm going to lay out a scientific case for the humanity of the unborn, and then a philosophic case is why they should matter as one of us. So without further delay, we'll roll this clip, and again, please, if you'd rather not watch, feel the freedom to look away. I don't want anybody to feel like you're being compelled to look at something you don't wish to watch. So without further delay, we'll go ahead and roll this clip. The video begins the process of answering the question, what is the unborn? But never should pictures substitute for a persuasive argument. So what I want to do in the remaining time I have left is lay out a case for the pro-life view. I will not be using religion to make my case tonight. I will be using science and philosophy. And I'm going to argue from science that the unborn are distinct, living, and whole human beings. They are not part of another human being. They are themselves distinct whole members of the human family. Watch what I'm about to do. I'm holding up my hand and I'm plucking skin cells off the back of my hand. These skin cells, called somatic cells, you've got them, I got them, it's the stuff we're made of. Each one of these cells on the back of my hand contains my DNA encoding. And I just sent a couple of hundred of those puppies hurling to their deaths up here on the podium. But none of you thinks I just committed mass homicide. And I'll tell you why. You recognize that these cells on the back of my hand are merely part of a larger human organism, me. They are not distinct whole human beings the way you were when you were an embryo, the way I was when I was an embryo. And this idea that we are identical to our embryonic selves is not a religious concept. It is established in medical textbooks worldwide. Keith Moore and T.V.N. Prasad, in their book Clinically Oriented Embryology, write the following, quote, human development begins at fertilization when a male gamete, or sperm, unites with a female gamete, or oocyte, ovum, to form a single cell, a zygote. This highly specialized totipotent cell marked the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. T.W. Sadler, in his book Langman's Embryology, writes, quote, the development of a human being begins with fertilization, a process by which the spermosome from the male and the oocyte from the female unite to give rise to a new organism, the zygote. Dr. Jaime Gordon of the Mayo Clinic writes, we can now say that the question of the beginning of life is no longer a question of theological or philosophical dispute. It is an established scientific fact. Planned Parenthood's former president, Dr. Alan Guttmacher, in his 1993 book, Life in the Making, wrote, this all seems so simple and evident that it is difficult to picture a time when it wasn't part of the common knowledge. Now I admit that thinking that an embryo is one of us doesn't seem at first brush to be very intuitive. How can something that small count as one of us? And I understand that it's easy to think that embryos are just mere clumps of cells. But they're actually not. They're not mere clumps of cells. And let me try to illustrate it this way. Suppose that after tonight's exchange, we go down to SFO, we jump on a charter flight, and we fly to Bowling Green, Kentucky. Any guys here know what car is made in Bowling Green, Kentucky?
Corvette.
You got it. I've been to the factory in Bowling Green, Kentucky. You can watch a Corvette from the first two metal plates being put together till that thing rolls off if you stick around long enough. Now, if we were there watching the construction of a Corvette, nobody in this room would say, you've got a Corvette when the first two metal plates are put together. And rightfully so. Those two metal plates could be used to make a table, a boat, who knows? Most of you would probably say there's no Corvette when the frame is fully welded together. And I would agree with you. Some of you would say, well, maybe we've got one when the powertrain is added. Engine, suspension, tranny, now we're getting somewhere. Some would say no when the body's attached to the frame. And some of you skeptics would hold out until the wheels touch the ground. Here's my point. Wherever you land on that continuum, nobody here thinks you got a Corvette when the first two metal plates are put together. And rightfully so. But men and women, at the embryonic stage, you did something no constructed thing like a Corvette ever did. You developed yourselves from within. There wasn't an outside builder putting you together piece by piece. Rather, from the moment of fertilization, that decisive break where sperm and egg cease to exist and a new being comes into existence, your development was internally driven. That's why you're not like a constructed thing, like a Corvette. But science alone, men and women, cannot tell us who matters. Science cannot tell you that we should value you as a human being. Science can give us the facts we need to determine what kind of being we're dealing with. But science cannot tell us how to treat you. There we have to do philosophy. And the question is this: does the embryo you once were differ from the young adult you are today in ways that would justify killing you at that earlier stage of development? And the truth is, as Stephen Schwartz points out, there's only 4 differences between that embryo you once were and the young adults that you are today. And not one of those 4 differences is a good reason for saying you could be killed then, but not now. As Schwartz points out, those differences are size, level of development, environment, meaning where we're located, and degree of dependency. Think of the acronym SLED, S-L-E-D. Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. I'm about to show you why those 4 differences don't matter. Size, there's your S in that SLED acronym. You were small as an embryo, the size of a dot at the end of a sentence. But since when does body size determine the value that you have? Men are generally larger than women. We don't think men deserve more fundamental dignity than women simply because on balance they tend to be larger. We don't think Dwight Howard, the new center for the Los Angeles Lakers, who will now again be world champions, thank God. We don't think that he's more human and valuable than all of us simply because he's a foot taller than everyone in this room. Body size doesn't bestow value. What about level of development? Yes, you were less developed as an embryo. Nobody disputes this. But it's not enough to simply observe that you're less developed at the embryonic stage. You have to argue why development bestows value. 2-year-old girls are less developed than 21-year-old young women. 2-year-old girls don't even have a functioning reproductive system that's working at its full capacity yet. Does it follow that the 2-year-old is less human and less valuable because the 2-year-old is less developed than the 21-year-old? Abraham Lincoln dealt with this very persuasively when he argued against slavery. When he would debate proponents of slavery, he would point out that the very arguments they would put forward to justify enslaving the black man worked real well to enslave many whites. Lincoln, and I'll paraphrase him here, said the following: you say man A is white, man B is dark, it is skin color then? The fair-skinned man having the right to enslave the dark-skinned man? Take care, by that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet with skin fairer than your own. Oh, you say it is not skin color, it is a matter of intellect? The white man having superior intellect to the dark man? Take care again, by that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet with an intellect superior to your own. You say it is not skin color, it is not intellect, but interest? The white man having it in his interest to enslave the dark man? Take care again, by that rule, you're a slave to the first person you meet who can make it his interest to enslave you. And Lincoln was showing, by the force of principled reasoning, any argument you put forward to disqualify the black man as a full human being worked pretty well to disqualify a lot of whites. By the same token, I don't know of many arguments used to disqualify the fetus as human that also don't work pretty well to disqualify newborns, and that's exactly ethicist Peter Singer's point. In his book, Practical Ethics, Dr. Singer argues that killing newborns is perfectly permissible if the newborn is suffering from a disabling defect and if it suits the interests of the parents. And he goes on to make his case by saying, look, there's no relevant difference between fetus and newborn that justifies saving the newborn, but not the fetus. Size, level of development, what about environment, where you were located? You were in the womb, now you're out. But how does where you are determine what you are? I got here early, and I saw a lot of you cram into this room. You changed location. You came from out there where it was cool to in here where it's hot and stuffy. But you didn't stop being you. When you rolled over in bed last night, either because you were snoring and your roommate got tired of it and poked you in the ribs, or because you had a bad dream, you changed location, but a new person didn't wake up in the morning. If that's true, how does a journey of 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly transform you from non-human, non-valuable thing we can kill to valuable human being that we can't? Answer, if you weren't already human and valuable, you don't get there just by changing your address. And finally, degree of dependency. You depended on your mother for survival. I agree. But since when does dependency on another human being mean that you can be killed? Conjoined twins share each other's bodily systems. In fact, Life magazine has featured these 2 girls, their names escape me at the moment, call it jet lag, I'm on East Coast time right now. These 2 girls, they followed since birth, they're now 22. They're joined literally at the hip. You look at these girls, there's 1 set of legs, and I saw them on television about a month and a half ago. From the waist up, they branch off into 2 body trunks, 2 shoulders, 2 heads. And what's really interesting is they now drive. I'm sorry, I am not on the road when they are. I want to go left, no, I want to go right, no, let's hit that dude. No, I'm just not going to be there. But these girls cannot be separated. Does it follow neither girl has a right to life because neither girl can live without the other? Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency, think sled. Those are the only 4 differences between that embryo you once were and the young adults you are today. And I submit to you, men and women, not one of those differences is a good reason for saying you could be killed then, but not now. Go ahead and look around the room. Just stare at somebody for a minute. Go ahead. Just stare. Guys, that cute girl you've been wanting to look at, now's your chance. Don't laugh. I met my wife that way. We'll have to bring that up in the Q&A. Just stare around the room. What makes us equal? Is my time up? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. What makes us equal? I'll tell you one thing. It's not something that can come and go like intelligence or self-awareness. There's only one thing we share equally. We all have the same human nature. And we have it from the moment we began to exist. Thank you.
The other people that have organized this meeting. I'd like to begin with the things that Scott and I have in common. We both think that abortion is important. I think we both like to live in a world with fewer abortions. Is that correct? Is it? Yes. Good. We both have strongly held, sincere positions. We're not telling lies. We're sincere in what we say. We're both wearing ties. We differ there because my tie's got happy condoms on it. I never thought last night it was Halloween ghosts, but because I'm pro-life.
Yes, he did.
I'm in favour of family planning. I'm in favour of wanted children. I'm in favour of fewer abortions, and those abortions that do take place, I hope they're as early as possible in pregnancy. Scott I bought your book, and I'm sorry I left it at home. I've got it. Scott wrote a book called Pro-Life 101, correct? It's a small book. I wrote a big book on abortion. But to some extent, it's a metaphor for the differences between us. Because Scott has just suggested that the fertilized egg is a person. And that if you adopt that, then all abortions are wrong. End of problem. Actually, I'd like to live in that world. It'd be so simple. I'm half jealous of that world. Because my experience is different. I think we're dealing with a very complicated topic. I have done abortions. I've practiced obstetrics when abortion was illegal, so I've seen the suffering of women that have abortions. I've sat with women in tears with unwanted pregnancies. I've travelled all over the world. I've seen a room full of raped women, 12 to 14 years old after the war in Bangladesh. I've done 5-minute operations which changed the next 50 years of a woman's life. It's called an abortion. I've seen women die from unsafe abortions, and I know how to prevent those. So I think you can only have this simple, blinkered approach if you don't really understand embryology. I have a PhD in embryology. I spent several years of my life looking down an electron microscope at embryos. I know about embryos. I know what I destroy when I do an abortion. I think you have to be rather reluctant to listen to women. Perhaps you haven't spent a lot of time in the emergency room. Perhaps you haven't been to wards in hospitals like Ghana, like Indonesia, like Bangladesh, where I've been, where women had 2 in a bed suffering from unsafe abortions. Perhaps when I was in Bogota, Colombia, I took one of my staff into a busy hospital and I asked to go to the abortion ward. It's never a popular thing to do. And I said how common abortion was, and the ward was empty except for one woman. Then I discovered it was Friday, because on Saturday the men are paid, and that's when the unsafe abortions come in. And there was one woman holding her hand in a dish of water. I thought she had an infected blood transfusion. I said, are you going to give this woman contraception? They said no. We had to remove her uterus. It was so infected after the unsafe abortion. And then she pulled her hand out of the water, and all her fingers were black, because the bacteria from the infected uterus going around her body had lodged in her fingers, and they hadn't yet told that woman she'd have to lose her fingers again. So I don't think that this is a simple topic. This is a moral. I don't think that's a person, I think it's a moral, and that's what you look like, that's what I look like about 3 days after fertilization. Fertilization is important, but it doesn't define things. There are things called molar pregnancies as a result of sexual intercourse. They're genetically unique. We throw them down the drain. We have no legal or ethical status. They're the result of sex. They're fertilized eggs that went wrong. This Corvette factory, the Corvette factory that I know from embryology, is about 1/3 of all the Corvettes produced are highly abnormal. Somebody forgot to put the wheels on them. They don't have a steering wheel. It's not like a factory. Human development is pretty complex. My wife is here. I'm going to tell us, she always says she learns something new. I want to challenge Scott on 2 things. One is, how does where you live determine who you are? Well, who is this? This is a baby. You think this is a beautiful child, Scott? Yes. That is the result of an ectopic pregnancy. Ectopic pregnancies are quite common. The embryo, instead of being in the uterus, is in the fallopian tubes, or attached to the spleen, or somewhere else in the abdomen. As a doctor, I would be sued for malpractice if I didn't remove every ectopic pregnancy that I've ever met. But very occasionally, we miss an ectopic pregnancy, and about 1 in a million goes and delivers a perfectly normal child. So we kill children every day in every hospital in the United States because they're in the wrong place, or at least we kill children if you care to define a molar or an early embryo as a child. It's an embryo, let's use the right. Would we kill the newborn? doesn't know this, I have killed a newborn child, and I'll tell you how. It was an anencephalic pregnancy. That is, it had a perfect normal face, and nothing behind it, no brain, just floppy skin. A fairly common, terrible abnormality. I was delivering that baby. I knew it had gone wrong. And so when it came out, I held the umbilical cord until it died. Because I knew it would die in a few hours' time anyhow. I knew it was more anguish to the mother if she thought she had a live child. It didn't have a brain. There are criteria in development. And I think having a functional nervous system is the time when I probably would wish to stop doing abortions. We have developed philosophical situations which allow us to allow a brain-dead person to die. That happened to my previous wife. She died in my arms with a massive cerebral hemorrhage. Her heart was still beating. Her kidneys went to work for 2 or 3 days. But for me, as a human being who loved her, she was dead. I think you can be brain alive before birth. So, Miles, I wonder if you could help put, or Andrew put these on more. Let's look at some facts. Some facts. Can you see? What did I do with you?
Thank you, Peter.
So I put a rather beautiful picture on the wall. Scott showed some ugly pictures, but I accept that they should be shown. But, the beautiful picture that you're seeing is a great picture by Provelli, painted in 1456. And it defines one of the things that I think is the defining principle tonight, and that is, when does life begin? This is the Annunciation of the Virgin. It's a fantastic picture. If you go to London, go to Mass Gallery and see it. And here it shows the angels telling Mary she's going to have the Christ child. There is literally a sort of laser beam coming down from heaven that will window for it to go through. It is an image of ensoulment. Now, whether you believe theologically in the soul, I still think you can ask the same question, when does life begin? And sincere people differ on when life begins. The assertions that Scott makes and the assertions that I make, we believe, have some concurrence with facts, but they are ultimately beliefs. And we cannot impose our beliefs on other people by using the law. This, I think, is a beautiful painting. The other beautiful thing I want to summarize my talk tonight is the First Amendment to the US Constitution, which separates church from state. I'm proud that my wife is a descendant of Madison's wife. James Madison had no children, so when Monticello was opened, her daughter, Martha's daughter, was there as part of the celebration, along with the slave of Madison, Mary. So if we believe in a country that believes in religious toleration, then we cannot use laws to impose our beliefs on other people. And any country that separates church and state must permit safe abortion. This is a graph from Romania. In the 1950s, communist countries had liberal abortion laws. And so, but in 1966, an evil despot called Nicolae Ceausescu suddenly changed the law. He made abortion and contraception illegal. This shaded area is called the total fertility rate. It's the average number of children women have. And at that time, the number of children women have jumped from just over 2, 6 months later, to 3.5. The birth rate doubled because women couldn't get abortions and they couldn't get contraception. Then, because I know as a doctor that when a woman wants an abortion, whether it's legal or not, she will get it, even at risk to her life. So let's talk about reality. So what happened was that the illegal abortion networks were recreated, but they did it very badly. So this red line is deaths from abortion. This blue line is deaths from childbirth, obstetric, maternal mortality. So slowly, the total fertility rate came down, but the deaths to women went up. They had more abortions. When Berlin 4 were wall fell. Romania killed Ceausescu about 48 hours later because they knew the suffering that you have when abortion is illegal. They changed the law. And the orange line is the number of legal abortions. They went from 0 to a very high number. The numbers are over here. So this would suggest that before that there'd been those numbers of abortions, you couldn't count them, but they were unsafe illegal abortions. Now these were legal but safe abortions. But, and this is the good news, as the contraceptive prevalence increased, the green bars, the abortion rate came down. So if you want, as Scott said he does, have a world with fewer abortions, then it's very simple. You make abortion legal, you do it safely, because that's women, if you respect women, that's what they deserve. And you link that abortion to good contraceptive advice. To me, it would be unethical ever to terminate a woman's pregnancy without asking her if she wants help with abortion. My experience is they would say, yes, doctor. That was my experience when abortion was illegal in England, and I had to get up every other night to clean up somebody else's illegal abortion. And I would say, when I was discharging them, can I help you with contraception? And they would say, I was just going to ask you, doctor. And that was a code for the never would have asked me. I was helping them. So if you want fewer abortions, this is the way to do it. And we're going to talk about, because sincere people, and you're seeing this tonight, Scott and I are sincere people, come to make different assertions about when life begins. What the Supreme Court says in Roe v. Wade is not, is abortion right or wrong? Not, is a fertilized egg a person, which I think is just silly as an embryologist. What it says is, when the theologians can't agree, when physicians can't agree, when embryologists can't agree on when life begins, it's not the role of the judiciary to determine when life begins. So Roe v. Wade is about religious toleration. This country is built on religious toleration. I'm proud to assume American citizenship, partly because of them. Now, in sad, 101, let's get beyond 101. That's the elementary course. I am, with respect, trying to go to a slightly more complicated situation, because we have to do that if we are to be ethical, and philosophical, and scientific integrity.
Thank you, Professor Klusendorf and Scott. So the way that we're going to work is the following. You'll work in a simple question-answer format. Given that Professor Klusendorf spoke first, you'll ask the first question. Professor Potts will respond, and then you'll return with his own question. So we'll go on for the next 10 minutes, and then we shall move on to the panels. So Professor Potts, would you like to begin with your first question?
Dr. Potts, you said you would like to see fewer abortions. If the unborn are not human, why do we worry about how many abortions there are?
An embryo is a fantastic thing, of great complexity. When I looked at my electron microscope, we looked at a little light microscope, and I was so awed by the complexity of early development, I would sometimes actually burst into tears, and my eyes would water, and I couldn't see down my microscope. That is, if I may say, a rather silly question. Don't ask any woman that question. It was to say, if I want to be pregnant, it's a wonderful thing to be pregnant. Don't call it an unborn. It is a misuse of language. And how we use language is very, very important. Yes. Do you wish to see Roe v. Wade with us?
Yes, I do. But it's important we know what Roe versus Wade said. Dr. Potts was wrong to say Roe v. Wade was neutral on the question of when life begins. No, it was not. Here's what Roe versus Wade said. During the first 6 months of pregnancy, the state may only regulate abortion to protect the woman's health. During the last 3 months of pregnancy, the state may, doesn't have to, but may legislate to protect unborn human life. But here's the caveat, if and only if those restrictions do not interfere with the, quote, woman's health, unquote. The court then went on, in the companion case, Doe versus Bolton, to define health so broadly you could drive a Mack truck through it. Justice Blackmun said that health included the woman's psychological health, her familiar health, meaning her family relationships, her social health, her economic health. In other words, you can justify a late-term abortion for just about any reason. So let me ask you this. The Supreme Court says we don't need to decide when life begins. People disagree, as if somehow people disagree means nobody's right. But they said people disagree, therefore we can't decide. But then the court decided unborn humans have no protection through all 9 months of pregnancy. Is that neutral? I don't think so. So yes, I want Roe v. Wade reversed, but we need to be clear on what Roe v. Wade says.
What Roe v. Wade says is, we need not resolve the difficult question of when life begins, when those trained in the respective disciplines of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus. The judiciary, at this point in the development of man's knowledge, is not in a position to speculate as to the answer. Now, where's Father Bill? Father Bernard Herring, the fantastic Catholic theologian, said, the moment of ensoulment, or the moment of conception, in inverted commas, in the fullest sense of the beginning of the human person, does not belong to the data of revelation. Neither does it belong to the data of science. You don't ask an astronomer to point a telescope at the sky to say, does heaven exist? Whether heaven exists or not is pretty important for some people. And you don't ask an embryologist to point a microscope at an embryo and say when life begins. And
Can I add to that? Am I still on the question block here, or whose turn is it?
At this point, I suppose it is free-flowing.
Okay.
Did I make a
No. Not yet.
So shortly after.
Your personhood will emerge during the Q&A. Men and women, when the Supreme Court of the United States says unborn humans are the kind of thing that can be set aside to be killed through all 9 months of pregnancy, that is taking a position on the status of the unborn. There is no way around that. And what Dr. Potts didn't tell you is that there have been legal scholars on his side of the issue, John Hart Eli, among others, even Lawrence Tribe, who have said that Roe v. Wade was garbage from a legal perspective for the very reason that the court feigned neutrality, but wasn't neutral. Not at all. Imagine if we're in the 19th century and a Supreme Court decision said, we're not going to take a position on whether the black man is a human being, but we're going to let you enslave him for as long as he lives. Is that being neutral? That's not being neutral. Now listen, I'm fine if Dr. Potts wants to argue for abortion rights, but he shouldn't pretend he's being neutral. And listen to what he said a few moments ago. He said any state that believes in the separation of church and state and tolerance must have legal abortion. It must not allow people to force their views on others. My question is, says who? It's almost as if Dr. Potts is saying there are no moral rules when it comes to abortion. Oh, but here's one. You've got to be tolerant. You have to make sure there are no rules. Well, that's not neutrality. That's imposing his view in the rule of law. Now, I'm all fine for us arguing for our views here today, but we need to be fundamentally honest about our positions. His position is not neutral. It's not neutral at all. Neither is mine. My position is not the only one here that relies on metaphysics. Here's my position. Each and every human being has an equal right to life, regardless of their stage of development or functional abilities. Dr. Potts, each and every human being does not have an equal right to life. Some have it based on their development. Now, both sides have a right to make their case, but those are not neutral positions. We both have metaphysical presuppositions we're bringing to this debate, and Roe v. Wade had its. It was not neutral. Where are we in the question? Okay.
Please speak up, sir.
See, if we look at the Romanian data, that if you make abortion legal, women have illegal abortions and die. Why would we wish to change the law so that we kill women as well as embryos? Scott, please answer the question.
You know, it's interesting that Dr. Potts brings up illegal abortion and the number of women who will allegedly die from it. I actually took the time to read through parts of his book. And it was very interesting, a quote I found from Dr. Potts and his co-authors, Peter Diggory and John Peel, in their book Abortion, published by Cambridge University Press. The most latest edition I have is 1977. But I want to read you what Dr. Potts and his colleagues say about the claims for high numbers of women dying from illegal abortion. Quote, "Unfortunately, the clinical aspects of abortion have become the subject of more emotional and political claims, as much as other aspects of this controversial subject. When moral arguments fail to deter women, the physical dangers are sometimes amplified. If a new long-term side effect is demonstrated, there will always be those who are pleased to tell you, 'I told you so.' Now listen to this. Conversely, those who want the law to be liberalized will stress the hazards of illegal abortion and claim hundreds of or thousands of women die unnecessarily each year when the actual number is far lower." Not my words, Dr. Potts. Dr. Potts' colleague at Planned Parenthood, former medical director Mary Calderon, wrote in a 1960 Journal of World Health article that the illegal abortion death rate in the United States was so low it was almost worth not remarking about. And then she said why it was low. She said physicians in good standing in their communities are the ones that are doing these illegal abortions, not back alley doctors with coat hangers, not people with rusty knives. And Mary Calderon went on to estimate that 90% of all illegal abortions in 1960, this is when allegedly all these women were dying, she said 90% are being done by physicians, and that's why the death rate is as low as it is. And then she cited two other things. With the introduction of penicillin and antibiotics, women were not dying the way they once were. But there's another issue here. Dr. Potts' argument begs the question. It assumes the unborn aren't human. Because otherwise what he's arguing is that because some people will die attempting to kill others, the state should make it safe and legal for them to do so. But why should the law be faulted for making it more risky for one human to take the life of another completely innocent one? Mary Ann Warren, a pro-choice philosopher that does not share my view, says this: the fact that making abortion illegal might be dangerous does not mean that's a good reason to make abortion legal if innocent lives will be taken. She's right. You have to argue for the humanity of the unborn. Sorry.
I do not retract one word that I wrote. Like when I practiced in England, most abortions were done by other doctors who were charging women. One of my PhD students did a study in Ethiopia when abortion was illegal. 10% of the women who went to an illegal abortionist had to give sex as well as paying money to end that pregnancy. Do we really have so little respect for women that we want that to happen? Why we're publishing this data is because it's so impressive. This is a place that shows you that there can be dangerous abortions. And those I have seen, there are doctors to do safe abortions in Nigeria. There are people with coat hangers. There weren't in Romania because the law was very tough on doctors. The doctor, my Romanian friend who made this, described what it was like to be a practicing doctor at this time. Adolf Hitler made it that you had to register your menstrual cycle because he was so opposed to abortion in marrying women. Are we going to do that? We cannot stop women having abortions. 4 out of 10 women in this room will have an abortion before they reach the menopause. We're not talking about a rare event. Whether those abortions lead to death or whether they're simply exploited and not done to the best. And again, you said you wanted the fewest abortions. I've met many illegal abortionists. None of them have ever given women contraceptive advice. What this shows so magnificently is you can have fewer abortions if you make abortion legal, do it safely, and give people contraceptive choices. And we should all be one, rejoicing that we know how to make abortions less common. If we go Scott's Road, we won't achieve that nirvana. We will live in a fairyland thinking that somehow or other we're stopping abortions. I live in the real world. I've been there. Scott hasn't.
Questions for our three panel?
Isn't there rebuttal speeches?
Technically, supposed to because there's a bit of a flow in questions. But I suppose you know.
We need rebuttals.
Very well.
This structure changed on me. I wasn't even aware we were going to do
I'll-
cross-ex, but
In that case, I will give each of the speakers 3 minutes.
no, we were told we'd have 10. Yeah, I'll settle for 5, but
Would that work for response to work 5 minutes each for rebuttal? That's a possibility. Work if we got 5 minutes for rebuttal. All right, we'll start with Klusendorf.
Dr. Potts and I agree on one thing. Every death from an illegal abortion is a tragedy. I could not agree more with that. And I'll tell you what, if the unborn are not human, even one death from illegal abortion is too many. Even one. But you have to answer the question, what is the unborn, before you answer the question, can we kill them? Now, Dr. Potts made a lot of comments there about me being responsible for the high abortion rate because of my alleged opposition to contraception. Just to be clear, I'm not here tonight to oppose any birth control that does not take the life of a developing human once it's begun. And let me make sure I get something straight here. His organization that he used to work for, Planned Parenthood, gets $300 million a year to stop unintended pregnancies, and their efforts have been a colossal failure. And he turns around and blames me, who gets no federal money to stop unplanned pregnancies. This is my fault? I don't think so. But it's interesting, too, because Dr. Potts himself questions whether birth control and contraception will actually lower the abortion rate. And I'll just go ahead and quote his own words from 1981. He's commenting on 2 South American studies, and he says this: Requienta showed in Santiago, Chile, that the poorest members of the community do not have very widespread use of contraceptives, and the incidence of abortion is low. The middle classes attempt to control their fertility, and both the use of contraception and the incidence of abortion rise. Commenting on a survey in Korea by the Health and Social Affairs Department there, Dr. Potts, Peter Diggory, and John Peel conclude the following. The number of Korean women in the 20 to 24 age group reporting that they have ever experienced 1 or more induced abortions doubled between 1964 and 1968, exactly paralleling the use of contraception. So even Dr. Potts' own research doesn't indicate that it's a slam dunk that if we use contraception, we're therefore going to have abortion disappear. That's simply not something his own research holds out. I want to quickly, before my time is up, cover a couple of points he made. Dr. Potts, would it be all right if I had you do that when I'm done with this?
If you're quick doing this.
I'll finish on my time, yes. Dr. Potts said that we can't impose beliefs on others, but he attempts to impose his belief on others. I want to know this. Does he oppose the HHS mandate that says religious groups must pay for abortion services through their health care provisions? Does he oppose that? It's part of Obamacare. That's right, if you're a religious organization and you oppose abortion, too bad. Through your health care plan, you must pay for abortions for your workers, abortifacient drugs. Does he oppose that? Or is he quite happy with having the state impose its will on the church? Separation of church and state? How about the HHS mandate?
I think church and state should be separated, and if somebody has a conscientious objection to abortion or to making contraception available, that should be respected. But I did not say we're not in favor of contraception. And I don't think I'm an illegal abortionist. What I said was illegal abortionists don't offer contraception. Legal abortionists do, and that is very important in bringing the numbers down. To be quick, are we about 5 minutes? Well, it's better to read something that I wrote. Abortion has no heroic dimensions. It's not a war with a victory or a surrender. It doesn't have a season like a famine. It isn't an instant catastrophe like a river of human anguish and suffering, made up of tens of millions of asynchronous, isolated, private acts. I believe abortion extracts an unremitting pragmatism from nearly every situation, and I regret the tendency to simplify abortion issues. I was summarizing a meeting which had sociologists, theologians in London some years ago. The biologists and clinicians in this meeting would say, we can never be certain when life begins. Nobody expects an astronomer to scan the constellations with the pearly gates. In order to tell us whether heaven does or not exist, biologists can only solve biological problems. I like the words of Daniel Callahan, the Catholic ethicist, who says, to say, for instance, that God forbids the taking of an innocent life, while conceding, as I think we must, that it is left up to man to define what an innocent life is to fail to see that the only possible meaning of this rule can have is the meaning human beings choose to give it. Professor Dunstan, who was a theologian in this meeting, said we should always be passionate and wind up the tension in relation to abortion. I think that's true. When people with differing philosophies sit down and listen to one another, as we have done, and referring to that meeting, and I think we are doing tonight, and you are doing, and I'm so glad that you're with us. Then they learn that those who lean towards the right to life and those who lean towards the right to choice are both striving to create a situation with the minimum amount of artificially produced fetal wastage. With a subject as complex and intractable as ours, common goals about the welfare of women and respect for the awesome process of human reproduction can still lead to different processes, but we should learn to respect one another's points of view, and we're doing that tonight, and that is our triumph, and that's our celebration. This was, when the birth rate falls in countries, as it did in Chile or South Korea, it's difficult to control fertility. Abortion rates go up, contraception rates go up. And that was something we discovered, and Scott's quite right to leave that. He left out the end, that as contraception improves, abortion rates eventually fall. And that's why we're so proud to publish the Romanian data, which we couldn't see the end of the story then. Now we know the end of the story from the Romanian data. When abortion is legal, when safe abortion is linked to contraceptive advice, the total number of abortions taking place plummets. And I am delighted that that is the case.
We now have 10 questions from the panels presented. I will introduce these panels. First, we have Berkeley Students for Life. They are representing the pro-life side of the debate, and they will present one question. They're led here by Brian Morris.
Caitlin Sills.
Oh, sorry. Huh?
It's Caitlin.
Caitlin,
Just a quick question. How does this work? We each answer the question? Or?
so I suppose that the panel stands up, they pose a question, each will answer the question, yes.
Okay, so what, we have a minute each to answer? Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
but just try keeping it as short as possible so we can go through questions. Universal Love and Peace will be the next organization that presents questions to the speakers. They're represented by Abhishek Roy. And from the audience, we will entertain only a few questions in order to keep the...
Actually, I think because we had that unexpected back and forth, in the interest of time, and it's all really crowded, both speakers will be happy to talk with everyone afterwards, but it's really hot. We had an unexpected back and forth, so I think we're going to not take questions from the audience right now. I'm really sorry. Okay.
Change of plans. We will take some questions from the audience. Like before, please write on a sheet of paper and pass it up to us so we can read it out to both of our speakers. So I think we'll start with yourself.
My question concerns the difference in abortion rates depending on whether the fetus is female or male, especially in developing countries. And this has come up, it was on the cover of The Economist in 2010. So my question is to Dr. Potts, whether this affects how he views the abortions if they're done because the baby is female, and for Mr. Klusendorf, how he thinks this also affects his view on abortion.
I would not terminate a pregnancy because of the sex of the embryo. I also find that a painful statement to make because abortion is a complex study. I know India quite well. There are women in India who will be beaten by their husbands if they have another female child. I can understand why that woman may be asking to terminate a pregnancy, because like the ectopic pregnancy, she is in the wrong sociological and environmental place. But we're all individuals. I personally would do that, and all the countries where it's happened have in Korea made it illegal. And the good news from Korea is that as the sex ratio changes, so women become more precious, and eventually it's a self-correcting process. But it is a painful one, and thank you for bringing it up.
90% of the Democrat congressional delegates in the U.S. House of Representatives recently voted against a bill that would have prohibited aborting female fetuses strictly because of their gender. My question is this. Dr. Pop said he would not terminate a female fetus because of its gender. My question is, why not? If the fetus has no value, and it's totally up to the woman what happens, and we shouldn't judge her, and we have no right to judge her, and we need legal abortion to have societal good, what right does he have to tell a woman that wants to abort her female fetus that she shouldn't do it? He's imposing his moral view on her at that point. Now, this is the same Dr. Potts that just got done lecturing me about wanting to impose my view on others, and yet he just got done saying he would not do an abortion on a female fetus. I'm a little bit puzzled by this. In addition to this, I would say that on ectopic pregnancies, just to come back to something Dr. Potts said a moment ago, on ectopic pregnancies, the physician does not intend the death of the embryo. He intends to save the life of the mother. And instead, what he does is he acts to save the mother's life, and there's the unintended result that the embryo dies. The death of the embryo is foreseen, but it's not intended. Now, Dr. Potts, ridicule is not an argument, and I would appreciate it if when I'm talking you would keep your seat.
This casuistical argument I find very demeaning in philosophy. Yeah. But just
Do we want to?
okay, here we go. Go ahead. Okay. That ectopic pregnancy that I remove has a 1 in 1,000 chance of living. It's mathematics. It's simple mathematics. And the Jesuitical thing that it's a sick fallopian tube is simply refusing to answer difficult questions. If you follow Scott's words, he's always turning everything into a black and white decision. He's turning everything I say into a black and white decision. I am insulted to be asked why I respect the embryo. That's a totally crazy question. I would still do an abortion of some embryos because it's a difficult, complicated process. Give me an individual case and I will give you my judgment. My judgment may be different from other people. I will certainly listen to the woman. The thing that unites Scott and myself is we're both men and we don't like to get pregnant.
The interesting thing, I get a follow-up, by the way, if you're wondering, since this question is extended. The interesting thing about us both being men, arguments don't have gender. People do. And by the way, pro-life women use the same exact arguments I do to defend the life of the unborn, which means my gender is irrelevant. Interestingly enough, if men shouldn't be speaking and deciding on this issue, we need to reverse Roe v. Wade that legalized abortion because it was decided by 9 men. On ectopic pregnancy, I don't think Dr. Potts heard what I said. I don't think he intended to distort what I said. I think he just didn't hear what I said. So let me just repeat it. In ectopic pregnancy, the intent is not to kill the child. The intent is to save the mother's life. Dr. Potts is right. It's a very lethal situation. And I agree, as a pro-life advocate, you should act to save the mother's life. You cannot reduce morality to behavior. Stealing and borrowing look the same. What changes them? The intent of the actor. And so the pro-life physician could perform this procedure to save the mother's life, and he is not performing anything like an elective abortion. because although he can foresee the death of the embryo because it cannot survive outside the fallopian tube, he doesn't intend the death. And that's the key distinction. So that in no way contradicts the position that I hold that each and every human being has an equal right to life from the beginning.
Okay, and we had some confusion about timing,
Yeah.
so if we could clarify that for each speaker and about who's going to get how much time and how many rebuttals, I think that would be helpful for both of our speakers.
Very well then. Okay, so the panel will present a question. Each speaker will get 1 minute to respond. I understand that there might be the need to maybe rejoin and to rebut, but please save that for the closing statements so that we can probably go through the questions. Next one.
And the person who's keeping time, if they can indicate to the speaker.
Next I will have Abhishek Roy from.
Hi, I'm really respectful of you coming here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. This question is kind of really directed towards Mr. Klusendorf. And so you were talking about Roe v. Wade, how instead of the state, how the regulate abortion in the last 6 months of pregnancy, except in cases where a health issue was on hand. And you're saying how courts today have had a very loose interpretation of that and have outlawed laws for psychological reasons, social reasons, not necessarily things that directly affect the life of the mother. Let's say you're in a situation in which a woman's life and mother is very much in jeopardy, and if she goes through the pregnancy, she could die, maybe of hemorrhage in her uterus or something like that. Then in that case, who deserves the right to live, the child or the mother?
If you didn't hear his question, can I repeat it without it cutting in on my tongue? He asked, what if the mother's life really is in danger? Roe v. Wade seemed to indicate that the state may allow protection for the unborn, but what if it really were a threat on the mother's life? And that's a fair question. By the way, you know how hard it is for me to stand up here and see you wearing that Berkeley shirt as a UCLA grad? It's painful, especially since you guys have killed us in football in the last 6
Your time's
years.
starting, ready?
Okay. In the case, there is no morality. How dare you impose your views on me? In the case of ectopic pregnancy, for example, you should act to save the mother's life because that's the greatest moral act we can do in that situation. Fortunately, right now, we don't have many cases. In fact, I'm not aware of any where you must end the pregnancy to save the mother's life. In fact, Dr. Thomas Murphy Goodwin, who runs the largest high-risk pregnancy clinic in the world at I'm jet lagged. Down at USC Medical Center, he sees 15,000 women a year are told by their primary care physicians, you must abort or you'll die, including women with advanced stages of cancer. And he says only 1 to 2 of those women a year actually require ending the pregnancy to save their lives. However, in a case, let's say we're back 150 years ago, where it was either the mother or the baby. The mother has a right to act in self-defense to preserve her physical life. I would say yes, she does have that right.
5 seconds.
A new question or the same question?
Same question.
Yes, no, I agree with Scott. The only way to put it is to, you have a right to preserve your life. As a physician, I'm very aware of social environment being just as painful as the physical environment. I think I would rather, be a child with one limb and with loving parents than be a child born into a family that didn't want me and was hungry and poor. So I would apply the same criteria that Scott has applied to making decisions about defending yourself and also to the social environment. I would also say one thing about gender, and this is something that I've observed as a man and as an obstetrician. I find that a significant number of women, when they are pregnant, have a different view than they did before they were pregnant. I have very vivid memories of a woman for the Right to Life movement in England who kept asking us as doctors, how are my records being kept? And we kept saying they're very confidential. She said, well, why? Well, said in the end, why are you so worried about how your records will be kept? She said, you see, I carry the banner in the Right to Life movement, and I don't want my friends to know I've had an abortion.
You've hit 10.
Now, I'm not making fun of that person, but that is quite common. Do not make a decision on other people's behalf, particularly of pregnant women, because they, I think, have a right to make decisions, and those decisions may be very different from the ones they've held when they were a student, or even...
Professor Klusendorf, the audience asks, what do you propose to do with the amount of embryos at fertilization clinics that inevitably gets thrown away? 1 minute.
It's estimated that there are roughly 400,000 embryos on ice, meaning embryos that have not been implanted that were the result of IVF technology. 400,000 does not mean 400,000 available. It means that that's the raw number. And embryonic stem cell researchers have wanted to get their hands on these embryos to destroy them for medical research. The problem is the parents don't want to give them up. So unless the lawmakers are going to override the rights of parents, we really have more along the lines of about 35 to 40,000 embryos available. Here's the question. Is it okay to kill one human being to help another one feel better? That's the moral issue involved. If I have a bad eye and you have a good eye, is it okay for me to forcibly take your good eye to make my bad eye better? I think you would say no, and I would agree. If we're talking about stem cell research that doesn't kill a living human being, I'm all for it. But killing one human to benefit another one, I'm not for it.
I think this shows what a strange, contrived situation you get into when you call an embryo a person. Nobody is ever going to implant those 30,000 embryos. Somebody's going to switch off the refrigerator. I think it would be great to use them for stem cell research, if you could do useful things, because those are not unborn babies, they're embryos. We have a loved one who had a wonderful baby from an egg that was being stored in liquid nitrogen. There were 4 other eggs which are never going to get used. I would not lose a nanosecond of moral sleep over those embryos, because they're embryos. To call them unborn babies is silly. I was very close to Bob Edwards, who did the first in vitro fertilization. He got, the Pope at that time said he was doing a wonderful thing, and it was a blessed thing to help infertile women have children. Now the Vatican has become much more hostile to women and to scientific research.
The second question presented by the audience. This is for Professor Potts. Do you mean that no one agrees when biological life begins, or that people disagree when a human being with intrinsic value and basic human rights begins?
That's a very good question. That people disagree on the second. They disagree when life begins. They disagree with installment, as in this picture. Everybody agrees what fertilization involves, is the question about it. So it is when do you assign in the continuum of development a Rubicon, and you say after this is a human being that's having some legal rights, and before it is an embryo. That is where we differ. And I could very well differ in relation to the late abortion that Scott took on those pictures. I am not technically qualified, I have not done late abortions. I've seen them done, and in my experience, many of women are driven to late abortions because of the hostility to women and because you make it difficult for women to get abortion. Nearly all of them have early abortion, and those very disturbing pictures would not have existed.
The absence of consensus does not mean an absence of truth. People once disagreed on whether the earth was flat or round. It didn't mean there wasn't a right answer. They once disagreed on whether slavery ought to be permitted. It didn't follow there was no right answer. The fact that people disagree means that there's disagreement, but it doesn't mean there isn't any truth. What Dr. Potts has not done tonight is say why his fellow embryologists are all wrong. I read to you the quotes from the leading embryology textbooks that say we can know when life begins. We can know. In fact, even people on Dr. Potts' side of the issue agree. Dr. Peter Singer says it's possible to give human being a precise meaning. There is no doubt that from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and eggs is a human being. This is not difficult to figure out. You don't even have to be pro-life to acknowledge that each of us began as an embryo. That's just scientific fact. Now here's where Dr. Potts loves to confuse things. He brings in ensoulment. I don't have to talk about a soul to determine when human life begins, and I'll talk about that in my closing.
At this point, we're going to the closing statements. I know that there's still some questions from the audience that have gone unanswered, but at this point you can direct them for when after the closing statements. We'll start off with Professor Potts, since Klusendorf has just spoken. 5 minutes, closing statement.
I think we're dealing with a difficult and complex issue, and I'm very glad that you're here. and thank you for staying in a hot room to listen to this. And I think both Scott and I are united in that we want you to think deeply about this problem. It is an important problem, and it's a problem that will probably face again many of you, either as a woman or as a partner. But there are serious differences about when life begins. Father Norman Ford is a theologian from Australia, and he wrote a book, When Did I Begin? And he has a very interesting argument. There are two types of twins. One, you have two eggs that get fertilized, there's only three types. Or you have an egg that divides, or you have an egg that develops like an early embryo, and then after about 20 days, two primitive streaks begin. That's how we get the Siamese twins talked about. He said, because within theology, a soul is indivisible, the soul could not enter an embryo until about 20 days after fertilization. That would be the minimum. And the teaching on ensoulment has always been, we don't know when life begins, but it couldn't begin before fertilization, so some people said we're cautious, we'll begin it then. But there are serious, profound differences. And I knew Alan Guttmacher was like my father. Alan had seen the suffering of women in Baltimore who had illegal abortions, and he was delighted when the New York law was changed, and we worked together to give safe abortion. You can call a fertilized egg a human being if you want to. What you can't call it in my book is an unborn child. It's an embryo. And you get into all sorts of tangles if you suggest that it's an unborn child. And going back to ectopic pregnancies, I am insulted to say that I would do an ectopic pregnancy because my intent is to destroy the fallopian tube. If I am honest, and I am an honest person, I know I am killing a potential human being, but I also know it's a very low chance of that embryo surviving. But I am divided from Scott by mathematics, not by absolutes.
Dr. Potts says there are no absolutes in embryology, including that one. Is he absolutely sure about that? He says there's an absence of consensus on when life begins. And he just quoted Dr. Alan Guttmacher, and I'm glad he did, because I'd like to quote his friend, Dr. Alan Guttmacher, again on when life begins. He said this, meaning referring to life beginning at fertilization. This all seems so simple and evident that it is difficult to picture a time when it wasn't part of the common knowledge. Ensoulment has to do with a philosophical question. I have not argued today that the unborn have souls. I've said they're human beings. I have not used the term unborn child. I've used the term unborn human. Ensoulment is a religious philosophical question. And Dr. Potts is right. Science cannot determine that. But science can determine when each of us began. Listen, the state does not have to take a position on whether 35-year-olds have souls to ban their killing. The state just says they're human beings, they shouldn't be killed unjustly. That's all I've argued here today. I've made no religious argument at all. I've not quoted the Bible. I've not quoted the teaching magisterium of the Catholic Church. I've not made any religious claim at all in terms of building my argument for the humanity of the unborn. I've cited embryology textbooks, and I'd like to review for you what Dr. Potts has said. He pointed to a picture here, it's not up there anymore, of an embryo, a few hours old, and said that is not a human being. In other words, it doesn't look like one of us. Need I remind you tonight that we have a very long history in America of defining people out of existence who don't look like we do? We have never gotten it right when we've written people off because they don't look like us. In 1904, there was a shameful event that took place in the Bronx Zoological Gardens in New York City. African-American and a pygmy by the name of Ata Benga was placed in a cage with an orangutan by followers of Charles Darwin who wanted to show what the missing link might have looked like. And they put this African man in a cage with a monkey because he didn't look like one of us. I have a view of humanity that is inclusive. I believe each and every one of us in this room, regardless of race, gender, size, level of development, station in life, has an equal right to life simply because we're human. I asked you to look around the room a few minutes ago. I won't ask you to do it again. But what I wanted to ask is, and before I ran out of time, is what makes us equal? It can't be self-awareness because none of us have that in the same level here. Some of us had a coffee hit in the morning and we're on the backside of that caffeine hit and we're in a lot of trouble right now. Others of us, we got a shot before we came here. We're doing pretty good. There's only one thing we all share equally in this room. We have the same human nature, men and women, and you had it from the moment you began to exist. I end with this. The youngest person rescued in Hurricane Katrina was named Noah. Researchers got to him 12 days after the storm surge. They found him submerged under 12 feet of water. Noah was on ice. He was an embryo. Local policemen brought him to the surface. And 2 years later, he was born and presented to Congress. My question for you in leaving tonight is this. If Noah had not been rescued, who would have died? A mass of tissue? Or Noah? Each one of you began the same way as I did, as a distinct, living, whole member of the human family. Dr. Potts has not presented evidence tonight to refute that, other than to ridicule it and say that he's offended by it. Being offended is not an argument. And so I ask you tonight, when did you begin? And when did you have value? I hope it's not based on your looks. I say it's based on our common human nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those enlightening remarks, Professor Klusendorf. My deepest apologies that the timing went off and we ended up staying later than usual. But I hope from tonight that you got really more of a sense of not so much as what the political ideas of this are, but more like a conceptual idea of when life begins. And more importantly, the arguments that you've marshaled to the scientists. Now, both professors here to take your questions in a moment, but we greatly appreciate that you taking the time to make discussion tonight.
If any of you would like a summary of the argument I made, pardon me, I just swallowed a Tic Tac, went down the wrong way. Dr. Potts, I may need an intervention. I have a sled card with a scientific argument I made and the philosophic argument I made on the back of it. You're welcome to come up and get one, and I do have copies of my book. If you don't have money, I'll give it to you. So.
And as a human being, if you choke, I'll look after you.
I appreciate that.